Okay, this talk is going to be about the Hindenburg, and it's going to be from a different take than probably anything you've ever heard. So I'm going to let this run in the background while I'm talking. This is the newsreel covering the disaster in Lakehurst, New Jersey. Now, the Hindenburg was blamed on static electricity. What you probably don't realize is there were 62 successful crossings without any incidents of the Hindenburg. And static electricity was also blamed on Flight 700 a couple of decades ago, even though a lot of credible witnesses, including Coast Guard officials, saw a missile hit it. So static electricity is kind of like when the UFO debunkers say swamp gas. So what really happened to the Hindenburg, it was a false flag that didn't actually work. So the OSS, which was the precursor to the CIA, had an asset. His name was Moe Berg. And Moe Berg was an Ivy League graduate. He could speak 7 languages. And he was a catcher in in baseball. And he was never more than a middling catcher, but he played about 12 seasons on 3 or 4 different teams. He could speak 7 languages. He was an Ivy League graduate. People said during the course of a day he would read 10 newspapers. He was a very brainy person. And he admits, he comes up to this guy, Tim McAuliffe, who worked for Spalding Sporting Goods Company, which was in existence back in this time. And he goes up to Tim McAuliffe a couple of weeks before it happens. He goes, "Hey, keep an eye out. A couple of weeks ago, there's going to be something big happening, something bad." And he thought it had to do with somebody being traded from the Red Sox. And so anyway, the Hindenburg happens, and then he runs into Moe Berg, and Moe Berg is all excited. He just seems to be brimming with energy. And he tells Tim McAuliffe, "Let's go to the Lobster Pot," which at the time was a pretty famous restaurant in Boston. And he goes, "Well, what do you think about that thing that happened in New Jersey?" And Tim McAuliffe says, "Oh, it's terrible what happened." And then in his mind, he realizes that he told him that it was going to happen. And Moe Berg admits that he assembled a team to bring down the Hindenburg. And Tim McAuliffe asked him, "Well, why would you do that?" And he said, "Well, we had to get that maniac Hitler to go to war with us." And if you look up, there's a guy named Hilaire de Barrere who had a intelligence paper out of Monaco. He was a retired OSS agent. When the CIA formed, he was thrown out because he was patriotic, I guess is the best way to say it. And he mentions it throughout several decades, ancillarily. And he had this intelligence paper that he wrote out of Monaco, and he died at 96. And his last intelligence report was about 9/11. He died right after that. So this is a footage of the Hindenburg burning, and like I said, it was brought down with an incendiary round. The incendiary round was developed in England to bring down German airships, and this false flag did not take. Hermann Goering, who was the head of the Luftwaffe, pushed it down because the Germans didn't want to antagonize the Americans, because they lost World War I because America came in. And so it is also squashed by more reasonable heads in Washington too. So here's some of people that were on the final flight, and a surprising number of people that actually made it away, and a lot of them were burned pretty bad. But remember, when hydrogen burns, a lighter than air thing, it didn't settle down and burn, it burned and went up. So a lot of people lived out of it that you wouldn't think would make it through this kind of explosion. But it was brought down by an incendiary round by a guy called Mo Berg. And here's Mo Berg in his Boston Red Sox. And here is Hindenberg typing away at his intelligence thing. Now, Mo Berg, this bastard, when he died in 1970, a bunch of books came out about him, that he was a spy, a cold-blooded spy for the CIA. And like I said, he spoke 7 languages. He was probably the smartest guy that ever played baseball. Another thing that Mo Berg was involved in that you might, well, probably 1 in 10 million people knows this, but I'll let you in on it. So there was an all-star, kind of like an all-star goodwill game between the U.S. and Japan. They asked Mo Berg, although he wasn't really a first-string catcher per se, he wasn't even remotely the best catcher in baseball, but he could speak Japanese. So they put him on the goodwill team to go to Japan. Well, he addresses the Japanese government. They all love him and everything, and since he's, speaks Japanese and among the other languages that he knows, and so they let him go. They take him around everywhere, and he has a camera with him, a movie camera, and he goes up to the tallest building in Tokyo and does a panoramic shot a couple of times over Tokyo. Well, he turns, once the U.S. goes to war with Japan, him being an asset for the intelligence services, turns it over. And when Doolittle did his Tokyo raid, they used that film to map out places to bomb in Tokyo. Remember, the Doolittle raid was to bloody the Japanese nose after Pearl Harbor, to show them that they were not beyond our reach. So anyway, there you go. Here's some things to look up. Like I said, Hindenberg, here he is again. He had that intelligence periodical. You can look him up. Again, Mo Berg. Lots of books written on him in the 70s. The definitive work on this is probably James Perloff's 13 Pieces of a Jigsaw Puzzle. But anyway, Mo Berg there was a lot brought up about Mo Berg, and he was a dirty guy. He was only useful to the CIA through about the 50s, and as happens with guys that are really smart, they don't come off good. Even if they're psychotic, they don't come off good to the intelligence agencies. They think they're too smart for their own good. He lobbied to become to work in Israel since he was Jewish. But anyway, Mo Berg, and like I said, he didn't pull the trigger, but he assembled the team that brought down the Hindenberg with an incendiary round. It only took one. So there you go. Thank you. I'm out.